Hello and welcome. My name is Nancy Blanton. I'm here to share with you a story seldom told, both tragic and true, and so compelling that I wrote a novel about it. Today, allow me to guide you on a virtual tour of the castles and towns then and now as this story unfolds. Let the mists of Ireland sweep you back in time to the turbulent 17th century, when Charles I held England's throne, when English plantations were claiming the most fertile Irish lands, when Irish clans could no longer fight against each other like warlords, but had to unite against their common foe, the English Parliament, taken over by a rigid Puritan majority. It was a great rising, a religious freedom, for the king's divine right, and for their own lands, heritage, and country. It is 1641. October brought forth the Great Irish Rebellion that started in Dublin, exploded in Ulster, then spread like the tide against all the land. By February of 1642, it also brought the longest siege in Ireland's great history, the Siege of Rathbury Castle. If you visited Rathbury Castle today, the remains of a single tower and the vestige of stone walls might cause you to wonder, why a great siege here? To what value? To what end? In the 17th century, there were few roads, and commerce depended upon access by sea. And where commerce thrived, so followed the threat of pirates and usurpers. A fortress by the sea was a valuable property for supply and for protection, and it delivered to its owner a position of wealth and power. But there was much more to be had here. In fact, 7 more castles dotted the coastline of the entire barony. All had once belonged to the Irish, and the Irish wanted them back. The siege began in the town of Ross in County Cork, the province of Munster, and Ireland's great southwest, where once a famous monastic school existed. But today you'll find a city called Rosscarbery, set against a peaceful, shallow estuary that leads to Rosscarbery Bay. And here you can visit a lovely cathedral, walk along a pier, browse through a craft shop, or relax at the fireplace at Nolan's Bar. Never would you guess that in 1642, the Irish stormed the small village and expelled the English settlers from every house. The settlers, leaving all their belongings behind, then hurried across the marsh and bog to reach Rathbury Castle, where an English garrison could ensure their safety, or so they hoped. The castle owner, Sir Arthur Fricka, welcomed 200 refugees within its walls, confident the siege would be brief because the English soldiers would come to their rescue. But the Irish troops, led by the McCarthy clan, soon surrounded the castle, and the English soldiers did not come. The nearest English militia was at the walled town of Bandon. Between Rathbury and Bandon lay the town of Clonakilty. Called Clon by the locals, it is still a crossroads and is considered a cosmopolitan town, at once traditional and trendy, leisurely and lively. Once known for its dairy farming, recently it was named the best town in Europe. But before that, a pirate built his mansion here, and war was commonplace. Sir Arthur didn't know that the Irish had also captured that town, and the militia could not pass the walled town of Bandon, built at a crossing point on the Bandon River. The wall extended a mile around the town. You might still see remnants of it in places, but the community has by far outgrown that boundary, and is populated by about 7,000 people, residing in fine homes nestled among rolling green hills. Here you can see the ruined Castle Bernard, the 18th century manor once owned by the first Earl of Bandon, and burned in 1921 by the Irish Republican Army. But that's another story. The militia of 1642 was 400 men strong, and many of them angry refugees from Irish attacks. They were so fierce and brutal that by the end of the rebellion, they would earn the nickname the Fire Eaters. In part, they would earn that name because of their merciless and destructive march to overtake the Irish-held castles that lined the Bandon River all the way down to the sea. After a failed Irish attack on their city, the Bandonians marched with a vengeance to the fortress Carriganas and pounded its battlements to rubble with their cannons. Next, they took the castle Kilgobbin without a fight, for the soldiers that had escaped Carriganas had told their ghastly tale, and the men abandoned their posts. Then, while the Bandonian troops took Castle Dundanere outside of the town walls, others marched further south to Coulmaine. Coulmaine was a seaside fortress that funneled supplies to the greatest prize of all, Kilbrittain Castle. This was Ireland's oldest castle, and the family seat of the MacCarthy Ray, the leader of the Irish forces in Munster, but it too was quickly surrendered to the Bandonians. From there came more failures for the Irish, at Cork City and at Liscarroll Castle in the north of County Cork. Many of these ruins you can see and touch and imagine the way of life that once existed there and the struggles the people endured. Meanwhile, at Rathbury, people were starving. Those who tried to escape the castle were killed, and Sir Arthur failed to negotiate from the Irish even a cup of milk for his poor pregnant wife. When one of Sir Arthur's Irish servants made a daring escape to seek help from a nearby castle, he found those castles, Glandore and Castlehaven, in similar states of distress. His best option then was several days at sea on a boat to the English-held harbor at Kinsale. For the proper tourist, Kinsale should not be missed, with its brightly painted homes and businesses, fine gourmet restaurants, and historic sites like Desmond Castle, James Fort, and Charles Fort. But in the 17th century, he would have been a very brave traveler who could get past a harbor jammed with English ships, a formidable fort and blockhouse, plenty of artillery, and some gallows in view. Over the several months, while Rathbury resisted, the Irish had taken all 7 castles that they had sought. Then they raised the pressure on the last prize, Rathbury, by digging a trench and building shelters so that the musketeers could hammer the castle with gunfire and terrorize the residents. The men and women who remained in Rathbury refused to surrender, and they gathered their last bits of strength and ammunition to fight back. Some of the people at Rathbury escaped by boat. Others died. By October, only 80 residents remained within this castle for the Bandonians to rescue, but that's not the end of this story. What became of the people as they departed for Bandon, and what brought the great Rathbury Castle to ruins? There is much, much more to this story, told best from the hearts and minds of characters based on the details in Sir Arthur Freca's true account. By 1643, the situation had changed in favor of a larger picture, consolidation of powers against Parliament and for the king. The result for Ireland could not be better said than in the words of author Margaret Ann Cusack in 1868. On the 15th of September 1643, a cessation of arms for 1 year was agreed upon, and the tide, which had set in so gloriously for Irish independence, rolled back its sobbing waves, slowly and sadly, towards the English coast, and never returned again with the same hopeful freedom and overpowering strength. At least not until 1916, but that's also another story. The story of Rathbury Castle is all about perseverance, survival, and love. You'll find it all here in When Starlings Fly as One.